Hi there. It's late on a Tuesday evening. It's January 2nd. T+428. 1 year and exactly 2 months since my transplant. Journal 347. It's rare that you start out a post, especially a post that comes after a long absence. The longest, I think, since I started posting. Knowing that what you're going to say is going to be controversial with someone, so that there are people who are not going to react to what you have to say or what you have to write in the spirit in which it is spoken or written. But I can't help myself. I really can't. One of the reasons that I haven't been able to post is that I haven't been able to get my head around the events of the last few weeks. And it's not just the COVID-19 and the pandemic, coronavirus, although that certainly would be enough on its own. I'm handling that pretty well. I've been practicing for 1 year and 2 months. So I've got this social distancing, physical distancing thing down cold. And so does Lesley. What's really done me in, what's really paralyzed me over the last few weeks is the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I think one of the reasons that it's bothered me is because a dear friend and my editor on Misfire lives about a mile away from where he was murdered. And I don't use that word loosely or lightly. But I know what I saw. It's a combination of the peaceful protests. It's a combination of the inexcusable depravity and looting and destruction visited upon our cities. At the hands of people who are not from those communities. And it isn't because I haven't seen it before. I moved to Los Angeles in 1962. I graduated from high school in 64. In 65, I went through, and we lived in Los Angeles. If you saw any of the footage from what was going on here recently in Los Angeles, I went to high school at Fairfax High School, which is right off Fairfax Avenue. And one of the buildings that burned was around the corner from the first place that we stayed, the first apartment that we had on Blackburn Avenue and 3rd Street. So these neighborhoods and what's going on there are very close to me. But in 65, we went through the Watts Riots. I think 30 people were killed. Destruction was almost incalculable. 30 years later, we found ourselves right back where we started, dealing with the riots in Los Angeles in 1992. And now here we are 28 years later. 55 years. In 55 years. And what's changed? What has changed? And why hasn't it? If it hasn't. Realistically, things are better in Los Angeles than they've ever been. Realistically, the police force is very different than it was in 1962, 3, 4, 5. Maybe even 1990s. Very, very different from that police force. But you can't have seen what we all saw in the video of that man on the ground, on his stomach, handcuffed, with a knee, with his head turned sideways, and knee on his carotid artery, and 2 other officers on his back. The blood to his brain was interrupted. The oxygen to his lungs was interrupted, and he was held there for almost 9 minutes. Probably many of which, as many as half of which, while he was unresponsive, and more than likely already did. You've got to wonder why it took so long for the government to react, why it took so long to charge the officer involved, why the other 3 officers have still not been charged. You've got to understand the frustration of people who deal with institutionalized, overt or covert discrimination on a daily basis. There's a part of us, a human part of all of us, that needs to empathize and recognize that this has been going on for so long. You know, I live in a community with the highest per capita population of active and retired law enforcement officers of multiple different departments, sheriffs, LAPD, Ventura County sheriffs, LA County sheriffs, FBI, DEA, ATF, you name it, we got it. I had a business here for 35 years, and we took care of their cars. We knew their families. The majority of them are wonderful people, and they understand when they swear an oath to serve and protect, it isn't just one segment of the population, it's everyone. But you got to wonder what allowed one person to remain on that job with the lives of other people in his community in his hands with 18 complaints. I mean, if you're a business owner and you're listening to this, how long would you have somebody working for you that failed to live up to your expectations 18 times? I can tell you that it wouldn't have worked in my shop, not for very long. You got to wonder how, when you're angry and you're looking at what's going on, you got to just ask yourself one question: is what would you think? What would you feel if that was your brother on the ground, your father, your mother, your daughter, your son? It's not like we haven't seen this before. It's not like we haven't seen it in other cities before. You got to wonder how satisfied you would be with how swiftly the wheels of justice turn when they turned like this and slowly. How certain would you be that those wheels were just? Especially after the autopsy came back. You know, the 2 different autopsies came back, and they were so different. So different from what you saw, what the world witnessed. Prejudice is real. If you've experienced it, you know it's real. It's overt. It's covert. Sometimes it's not out in the open. Sometimes it's hidden. Sometimes it's individual. Sometimes it's institutionalized. I've experienced it more than once. It's not fun. It's not pretty. It's not pleasant. It's pervasive. It's insidious. And the worst part about it is sometimes the people perpetrating that prejudice don't even know they're doing it. They're not even aware they're prejudiced. In this particular case, it's probably the result of 400 years of dominance and discrimination. 400 years of stolen opportunity and discrimination. Institutionalized oppression, maybe. It's blackface and bad jokes. Jokes that perpetuate stereotypes that are anything but funny. You know, it's 55 years since the Watts Riots. And while we've come a long way, there's still too many places where nothing's changed at all. I'm sorry, but in my opinion, what we're facing here is far more dangerous to our culture, to our society, than the coronavirus. Mostly because we're unwilling or unable to come to grips with it, come to terms with it. We're not willing to look in the mirror and see ourselves as we truly are. And until we're willing to do that, nothing's going to change because there's no reason to. I wrote in the blog that until we see the other in ourselves and ourselves in the other, until we can feel and hear and see that pain as if it was our own, there will never be a reason to change. Does that justify the damage, the looting, the destruction? Of course not. No rational, reasonable human being will ever tell you that it does. Should we tolerate that as a society? No, absolutely not. Do the people responsible need to be arrested, charged, brought to justice before a judge, incarcerated? Absolutely. No question about it. But do we need to differentiate between that and the message of healing and hope that needs to be spread across the nation so we can get back to the business of being the best of what we were meant to be, that we can be? And before somebody starts branding me as a bleeding heart liberal, if you know me, you know I'm not. I'm a former business owner. I'm relatively conservative in most respects. I understand property loss far better than most people. I understand damage better than most people because I've experienced it. But I'm not anti-police either. I've worked with too many. I've gotten to know too many. I have too much respect for too many. I've said for years, if you want to understand what they're going through, volunteer for a second shift ride-along. And when they do a routine traffic stop, you get out of the car with them on a lowered vehicle with blacked out windows. And tell me how comfortable that makes you feel. I guess there's one more thing, and I apologize for this being as long as it is, but indulge me. It's my therapy, I think, for this particular instance. The one thing that's missing from so many of these posts that I've seen and read and listened to over the past couple of weeks is a call to action. You know, what do you do once you're aware of something, once you've been exposed to something? Because once you've seen it, once you've listened to it, once you've opened your mind to whatever it is, you can never unsee it or unlearn it or unhear it. So I'm gonna share this with you. The one thing that's missing from most of these posts is a call to action. It's what do you do? What do you do with what you know? What do you do with what you've seen? What do you do with what you heard? My call to action is not complicated. It's not hard. My call to action is to listen. Listen with your heart. It's a call to action to see, not with your eyes, but with your soul. I want you to think back to what you've witnessed, what you've experienced, what you've heard, what you've seen. The number of times that you knew it wasn't right, that you knew that it was hurtful, it was painful, at least to someone or some group, and you didn't react, or you reacted in a way that didn't make you proud later on when you thought about it. I guess my call to action is to raise the bar. To raise the bar, to accept less and demand more. More of ourselves, more of our leaders, and to make a difference in the world. That's it for tonight. Stay well, stay safe, stay home, stay focused. Take care.